Hello and welcome to episode 12 of the UFOcast Does Captain Scarlet, and with this time we're talking about Shadow of Fear. And I guess this is another sort of in the mould of Spectrum Strikes Back, in that this is about Spectrum taking the fight to the Mysterons, but I think it's altogether more successful than that. Partly because there is a Mysteron threat, we will destroy your satellite, essentially. But also because it just doesn't spend a lot of its running time faffing around. There is that interesting thing of what is going on at the beginning, because you think, oh, they've failed, but actually they've planned to send a decoy satellite to get blown up by the Mysterons. So that's all quite clever. I like the sense of scale that you have of the observatory, with the way it's established. Direction isn't a thing that I've particularly focused on or noticed before with Captain Scarlet, but I think I'm thinking about it more this time round, thinking about how shots and scenes are constructed and convey stuff. And there's nice detail with the SPV on the model of the observatory and all that kind of stuff. And there's a nice tension that is built throughout the episode as to whether Spectrum are going to succeed or not. And spoilers, they don't. I guess there are parallels to be drawn between this episode and the UFO episode Close Up as well, in that they're both about sending a satellite to spy on the planet of the enemy aliens. This is a lot more successful, I think. Close Up is one of my least favourite episodes of UFO, whereas this is a lot more interesting. And I guess having Dr. Breck in the second half of the story as the antagonist helps as well. I think this episode throws up a lot of questions, though, in the continuing figuring out what's actually going on with the Mysterons. Because the first half of the episode does set up the idea that you could send a satellite to Mars and them not pick it up. But they clearly know something's going on because they kill Dr. Breck and get him to blow up the observatory. So it still plays into this idea of mine that actually the Mysterons are just having a laugh. They could wipe out humanity at a stroke, should they choose, but they choose not to. They choose to play these games. But it doesn't seem to occur to Spectrum that that's what's going on. They seem to think that this could be a successful mission, you know? Also, I'm not entirely sure what they are trying to achieve, given that they will have had plenty of opportunities to photograph Mars before the discovery of the Mysterons, right? And what kind of quality photographs are you going to get from Phobos? I don't know. It seems a little pointless in that regard. There's also the mysterious Operation Sword, which I had forgotten about, and the episode ends with kind of like saying, no, that's still going on. And I can't remember what Operation Sword is. And I can't remember whether it's a narrative thread that gets picked up again. If you're commenting on this somewhere and you know, then maybe you will pop a comment. I will no doubt come to more Operation Sword at some point, if it's there to be found. But that was something that I'd completely forgotten about, and I'm now intrigued. But the fact that I can't remember it means that maybe there's not much of a payoff. But the idea that there is a sort of wider plan that Spectrum is working to in their fight against the Mysterons, rather than being reactive, as they are most weeks, where it's a case of Mysterons have said what they're going to do and Spectrum have to stop it. This is more of we're going to take the fight to the Mysterons, even if in this case they are unsuccessful. And spectacularly so. I mean, there's some great continuity in this episode. Well, and I think one of the things I'm struck by generally watching Captain Scarlet is how the different elements fit together in terms of the models and the supermarionation, and not so much in this episode, and possibly not at all, the close-ups of people's hands. I'm thinking in watching this, maybe I didn't see any, and that they were actually puppets pressing buttons. But there's clearly a lot of work that went into thinking about how those things would mesh together, and you have the destruction of the observatory at the end, and as it's blowing up, you're like, oh, there's two people inside there, and then they show you a shot. Very brief shot of the two technicians being covered in rubble as they die, which is just a reminder once again of how brutal and gruesome Captain Scarlet is for what is ostensibly a children's show. And this was something that my parents were quite happy for me to watch when I was, I must have been about 8 or 9 when it was repeated on TV. But I guess these were things that I didn't really think about at the time, about quite how brutal of a show it was. And maybe because it's puppets, it's different. I don't know. So I don't know. I feel I've been slightly more rambly on this episode, but generally, Shadow of Fear is an episode that I do enjoy. It's a lot of fun and nice to see Spectrum lose again. Well, I don't want to say nice, but just interesting to see Spectrum lose again. Another thing I've just remembered is the whole Mistron detector thing. So nice to see Captain Grey and Melody getting in on the action in the Spectrum helicopter. But again, just a reminder of how ineffectual Spectrum Strikes Back is, in that this is the great opportunity for them to get the Mistron gun out. And they don't. But Captain Scarlet and Captain Blue get out a Mistron detector. Captain Grey has a Mistron detector. The implication is that maybe they spotted Dr. Breck with the Mistron detector. That's not entirely clear. But that's another addition to my continuity, because I had remembered that Art of New York has a Mistron detector in, but I hadn't remembered that this episode does as well.
Unfortunately, this week's Spectrum agent has been waylaid by the Mistrons, and so I have no extra contribution for you this week, I'm afraid. If you would like to be a retrospective contribution for this episode that I can publish in a future week, head over to ufocast.co.uk/captain to sign up, and that's the place to go if you want to contribute to any future weeks as well. I'd love to hear from some more of you.
This is actually episode 1 on the VHS order, episode 19 on the DVD. And obviously on VHS, this was never intended to be like, well, this is the first episode, but apparently when the VHS range began, there was a compilation of this and the 3 episodes about the Mistron base on the moon, so Lunaville 7, Crater 101, and then Dangerous Rendezvous. So that's one of the things that makes the VHS order completely out of whack, because obviously if you start Captain Scarlet with this episode, you have absolutely no idea what's going on. I realise that I haven't kind of checked in on where we're at with the VHS order in terms of, and the DVD order in terms of what continuity has been broken. So obviously putting Shadow of Fear first means that you've got the Mistron detector, which you don't understand that. You don't understand a lot of things. But thus far, that's the only example of messed up continuity. As far as the DVD order goes, again, we haven't broken any continuity by having things out of order. So although the Blu-ray order is the one that's closest to the production order, and therefore continuity makes much more sense, the orders that the DVD and VHS range are in also, while having various things out in completely different places, hasn't really broken those bits of continuity that we have thus found. But I'll be interested to see how that progresses as we go on. New Mistron powers. Obviously, we have killing people by making your planet glow. It's not quite explained quite why Dr. Breck dies. He's just watching Mars and it glows, and he comments on this, and then boom, off he goes. Which again plays into that whole idea of like, well, the Mistrons know what's going on, and they're just playing, and quite horrible to think that they could just kill you by making their planet glow at you down a telescope. Is it a win or a loss? It's definitely a loss. Spectrum lose this one. And Dr. Breck will appear on the Mistron Gallery on UFOcast.co.uk, so head over there to look at that and keep track of which puppets have been Mistronized most times. So that was Shadow of Fear. Next week we'll be looking at The Heart of New York.